little touch and go, but
thank you for doing this. I appreciate it.
no, really, it's such a privilege for me to introduce Yehudis. The truth is, Yehudis is one of two women that I refer to as my teacher. She may not know that, but I often will say she's my teacher. I first met Yehudis long ago, Hizuk Mission, when I was wowed by the tour of Kavarin. Remember, that was like one of the first things we did with Yehudis. She opened up perspectives that for me were unapproachable before that on how to access Tzaddikim that I still use to today. I much followed her everywhere, including her women's trip to Uman. I think it was like 5 years ago-ish now. And the best way I find to describe Yehudis is that she has a unique gift of like incredibly developed and harmonious right and left brains. Like she's just so smart. She integrates fluidity with history and text, with her Breslover Hasidus and Musar, breadth and depth on both sides. Very rare to find. And really, one of the silver linings of the pandemic is now I get to learn with Yehudis several times a week. I just heard Sarah asking about signing up for Shaviti classes, which is Yehudis's really special school in Jerusalem, and is now offering just, I usually have to put 8 on the registration, and then like I pare it down so I'm real with myself, like how many can I really get to, because I'm not exaggerating. They're really incredible classes, and I really encourage everybody to try at least one. If you can only pick one, it's great. But you know, for me, seeing and hearing Yehudis on a regular basis is just what I consider my opportunity to grow and strengthen in the deepest way. I want to add to end on a personal note, my gratitude to Yehudis. She actually is on my foundation's initiative, the Jewish Education Innovation Challenge. She's part of our family now, and she's featured on our God Expansion page as a master teacher of pedagogy of teaching God. She was interviewed, and that interview is being posted up on the page, and she's one of the resources that we rely upon. So with that, I will say that I took the liberty to introduce you, Yehudis, from a personal perspective, but your bio obviously is important, and I'll post it on the chat if anybody wants to see the details of where Yehudis came from and her school and what she does. But anyway, thank you so much, Yehudis, for being with us today.
Thank you so much, Minna. It really makes me so happy when I see you in classes. I'm like, she's stuck around. She's sticking with it. It's great. I'm not the only show over there. Like school, we have a lot of wonderful teachers and very focused on the fullness, you know. Are you able to hear me, Barry? Can everyone hear me? Yeah, okay, good. So I wanted to start by sharing a song with you. This is really for me like a little bit of an inauguration back into music, because I just came out of Avelus, my year of Avelus for my father, Zichrono Livracha, last week. And I really felt like there's something that I want to give you as a gift. You know, everything in learning is really a gift, because HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us this beautiful Torah. And so all we have is to just take whatever we can and then share it with other people. So I want to share something with you that's close to my heart. Now, because I haven't played any music, like, you know, it's already a year since I've touched an instrument. So forgive me if I'm a little rusty, but I will do my best with it. And the reason why I want to share the song with you is just because it really touches upon what I'm going to be talking about. Now, I know that the theme of your Chizuk mission, you know, it's so interesting that to have a Chizik mission, the virtual Chizik mission, but we're working with the Kalim that we have, right? Hashem put us in a situation, and so we do the best with what it is, and there's actually amazing growth and change that's taking place because of this process specifically. Like even with our school, your Chizik mission has also in certain ways, it can be an expansion of the Chizik mission. The fact that you can't come, the fact that you have to put it all online, the fact that you have to, like find new pathways of communication and being in everything, and Avodat Hashem and everything we're doing and serving HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and in our whole way of being. Like the fact that something closed down really means that something else is opening up. So I found this to be true very much with school, that things really opened up for us because we're now all in a situation where it's so clear. You can't manage if you don't have chizuk. You can't manage through a period like this unless you are constantly drawing from the well springs of self-strengthening, hischaskus, Torah, inspiration, needed all the time. So if anything, the situation that we're in as a whole, the world is in, everybody's in whatever way it is for us, that's only made it all the more clear how important this kind of a mission is, and the work that I'm doing is, because we really can't live without the chizuk, and we can't live without the constant Torah flow. So your theme is about reaching, what's the official name? What's the official theme?
Living these extraordinary times, Einod Milvado.
And you had and today's theme has its own theme. Today has its own theme.
Can we call it filling up your tank with gas? Because that's what I would call
it. Today is really becoming the possible you.
Becoming the possible you. So I'm the last session of the Possible You Day?
Yes.
Okay. So I want to talk about the possible you, but you know what the possible you is? The possible you is you. That's right. The possible you is not something divorced from you. It's not something far away from you. It's you. So the question is how do we get to be closer to our essential self? Because the essential self is there. It's not that it's far away from us. The question is how we're going to be with it more. So this song is, if you daven Sfard, I don't think in Ashkenaz it's there in the beginning of the Siddur, but there's a section of the Siddur of the preliminaries before you pray in the morning. And there are the songs of the morning. And you may notice them. Some Siddurim will have like a Yedid Nefesh for the morning, right? Adon Olam, everybody has in the Siddur. There's a whole bunch of songs that are preparatory to prayer in the morning as a way of waking up the self into yourself, meaning that you're coming into yourself as you wake up in the morning and your soul returns to you. And so you need to be empowered to be able to do what you need to do during the day. And so we have these songs of the morning, and different Siddurim have different traditions about what's included and what's not included. Now, this song that's in the Sfard Siddur, I'm only going to do 3 verses of it because I don't want to take too much time, but I want you to feel it because it's really, really strong. And I'm just going to sing it. And then afterwards, I'll tell you what the words mean. Okay? Can we do it that way? All right. And I haven't played in over a year, so forgive me. Is the music coming across okay? Can you hear the guitar? Simu lev el haneshama l'Hashem shivaho ve'achlama ve'oira ke'or hachama shivosayim ke'or haboker odel oel leivav choker leivav choker beron yachad beron yachad beron yachad beron yachad kochvei boker mikisei kavod chutzava lagor b'eretz arava v'yohira li'atzil milava u'la'ira lehifnos boker Odel Oel, Leivav Choiker, Leivav Choiker, Beron Yachad, Beron Yachad, Beron Yachad, Beron Yachad, Kochvei Boiker, Vachilu Hoania, Yechidat Ama Unekia, Vashem Nafsho Lochia, Echizker Yahora Poiker, Odel Oel, Leivav Choiker, Leivav Choiker, Beron Yachad, Beron Yachad, Beron Yachad, Beron Yachad, Kochvei Boiker. Now the Zemer is actually it's quite a bit longer, but I wanted to share just these 3 verses. You know, the words are like this. Pay attention to the soul. Leshem Shavo V'Achlama. She's like these jewels of the breastplate of the Kohen Gadol. The Leshem Shavo, onyx and diamonds, and her light is like the light of the sun, and it's Shiva Sayim or Habukir. The light of the soul is like 7 times the power of the light of the sun. And then the refrain is Odela Kel. I'll show my gratitude. I'm expressing my gratitude and my thanks to God. Levav Choker, this split heart of mine, you know, and he's the one who's Choker Levavot. He's the one who knows what's in my heart, what's really inside of me. My soul came Mikise Kavod. It came down and it was hewn out from God's throne. It came down to dwell Be'eretz Arava, in a very, very dried out, desolate land that's here down in this world. And it's working all the time, and it needs Hashem's mercy all the time to be saved from all of the harshness of this world and to shine its light brightly, brightly in the morning when it's restored to me. And the last verse that I chose, which is one that I'm very close to my heart and close to our subject. Give life to the poor one. What is she? She's unique, she's perfect, and she's pure. The soul, unique, perfect, and pure. Vasher nafshalochia, and if your soul doesn't have life in it, if it's not alive, if it's not full of, if you don't give it energy and strength and empower it, how are we going to manage to see the light of a new day? It means that we wake up in the morning and we really need to be in touch with our simple, essential selves. Now, this week's Parsha, Parshas Vayetze, so Yaakov Avinu, he leaves from Haran, he leaves from Canaan and he goes to Haran, and goes out from Beersheba, and it says that he had a dream. He went to sleep in the place, and he had a dream, and he saw a ladder that was, its feet were on the ground and its top went up to heaven. And the deeper sources explain to us that that's the nature of the soul. It's called the Sulam Mutzav Artzav Osho Magia Shemaima. The nature of the soul is that it's got 2 feet, its feet are on the ground, and its top goes all the way up to heaven. Now, in order for me to understand myself, my you, right? We're talking about your possible you. It's your you. How much you're going to be in touch with and how much you're going to bring down and draw down to be manifest in this world depends on you. But the you that's you, it's a ladder that's, its feet are planted, well planted on the ground, on the earth, and its top goes all the way up to heaven. That means a human being, the human soul, we talk about levels of soul. You've already had like a whole day of classes. You already had classes for a few hours. And I'm sure you've heard about all of this before. It's nothing new. That the soul has all of these levels, and there's different parts of the soul, and so on. And we talk about nefesh and ruach and neshama and chaya and yechida, all of these very, very lofty, lofty ideas. But you know, in a certain way, there's a problem with talking in that language, because because it winds up abstracting something that's very simple and straightforward, which is that everybody needs to be authentically themselves and allow the nefesh, we'll call that the totality of your soul that's available to you at this moment in time. That's the language that we could use. The soul means the whatever extent of your spiritual self is available to you right now based on who you are, where you come from, and the work that you've done so far in your life. So that nefesh quality, this world tends to drive it away from being fully expressed. We deal with people, and in social situations, we wind up having to be performative. And things are required of us in terms of keeping the peace and being good soldiers in all of the structures in which we exist. And so we develop the habits very, very early on of not really being our spiritual selves. We start this from childhood, where we learn to be performative about everything. And now, let's say we get to the age, I don't know what the average age is in this group. Like, I'm turning 49. So you get to a point in your life and you're like, I want to be me. I want to know who I am. I want to be in touch with a person who's not in touch with their essential self. Ech yizke le'or haboker. V'hachiyu ha'aniya. Give life and empower this nebuch, this poor sweetheart, this soul of ours. She's yachida tamu nekiya. She's unique. She's perfect. She's so pure. V'asher nafsha lochia ech yizke le'or haboker. But this soul needs so much. It needs to be brought to light. Now, we're working in classes. We're doing a lot of work the last months in the work called B'nai Machshava Tova of the Piasetzner Rebbe. So if there's anybody here who's in that class, you're going to forgive me because we're actually going to be going over some things that we had talked about last Wednesday. But they're so important and they're so powerful. I really want to share them with you. She wrote his book, the Piasetzner Rebbe, Rav Klona Miskaman Shapira, Shem Yikom Damo. He shared this work almost 100 years ago. And he speaks in such a powerful and clear language about our psychological, emotional realities that you'd think a Hasidic Rebbe from the 1930s, like, where did he get this language to talk about these things in such a way? But he had the language and he had it all there. It's right there in this farm. So he speaks about in B'nai Machshava Tova, after a lot of deep work that he's guiding his students through, he comes to a point where he says, for all of this lofty spiritual stuff that we're talking about, what are we really trying to get at? Is that the nefesh, your spiritual self, your real self, my real self, should have an opportunity to communicate and express itself in the world. And in order to be able to really ensure that that happens, I have to be aware that there are many, many habits of mind and conversation and my habits of being that are actually standing in the way of me being able to do that. So I hope you're going to be okay with me sharing text with you, because I think it is really important to see his language. So I'm going to share. I don't have screen sharing on. Okay. If not, then not. It's okay.
I can give it to you. Hold on one second.
If you want to. I just think it's a benefit for anybody who has the ability to actually see the words in front. It's good to see them. But it's not, I'm not, set on it. I'm not dead set on it.
You have it now.
I do? Okay, good. That way I can, I don't have to split my screen. Okay, so you can see what's here? Is the text here in front of you?
Yes.
Okay. So see, this is the thing, like a book like this, it just looks like so black and white, but it's so multidimensional in terms of what's available to us. So one of the things, I marked off some of the text, but I like to have it with me because I really think also you should have the opportunity to see it. He says, V'kevan, here, the first blacked off part. He says, if our purpose is that we want what's called Giloy HaNefesh, we really want our souls to be able to be revealed and expressed in the world. So we have to make sure that the rest of our lives, in all of the areas of our life, we're not doing the stuff that is keeping us from really being able to be our full selves. And then he talks about, the first thing he talks about is integrity. He talks about two real qualities, well, three, but it's more like two. He talks about pshitut, tmimut, and emet, but the emet and tmimut is the same. Pshitut means simplicity. Pshitut means simplicity. That's how it's usually translated. And tmimut usually means wholeness, but he means it in the sense of integrity. Now, when we talk about integrity, like most people would define integrity as like telling the truth, being honest in your dealings with people, having integrity. Integrity in a physical sense means a thing being itself. Like when you say about, that a substance has integrity, in science, it means it is itself. It holds together. It is unified in itself. When we talk about simplicity, like in science, when you say something is simple, it means it's not compounded by other elements. It is itself. In the sense that, like, we talk about Hashem being unified and one, he's also called Pashut, simple, oneness and unity. Now, think about what it means for us to be people of integrity, not only in the sense of always saying the truth, because he makes clear to us a person could be a truth sayer and still not be a person of authenticity and integrity. And a person could also, and it's also important to recognize that where falsehood creeps in, it's related to a deeper lack of authenticity and integrity. Now, what does this have to do with like your spiritual self? You know, we used to thinking of spirituality on one plane, and then we have all this talk about integrity and authenticity. Like, what are we really talking about? Well, it says HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Hashem is, his seal is truth. And realities as we experience them are manifestations of his will. And so the realities in which we're in, the things that are true, truly true, that we're dealing with, that's called where he is in the truth of our situation. And when people are honestly and really relating to the truth of their situation and other people's situations, that's one way in which HaKadosh Baruch Hu and the spiritual self is manifest and expressing itself there in that place. For example, I'll give you an example. I remember years ago, I had a neighbor, and she was, like a friend, someone I knew her fairly well. And I went out, I went to go to the store or to pick up one of the kids, I don't remember. And I ran into her and I said, like people do, I said, how are you doing? Ma shlomech. Ma shlomech. So when you ask somebody, how are you, right? So people ask, how are you all the time? But the way in which we ask, how are you, has varying degrees of authenticity and integrity to it. Even such a simple thing as asking, how are you? So most of us, when we ask, how are you? It's like, how are you? I'm fine, Baruch Hashem, move on. It's like a formality. It's a formality of human conversation. If you run into someone that you know really well and you have time to talk to them, so maybe when you ask your, how are you, you're actually being more present and real in the communication, and that's going to elicit something from the other person. But most often, that's not what our communications are like. That's just like casual. We're very casual and that's the way human beings are. Now, on this occasion, I remember I ran into her and I said, Ma shlomech, because I hadn't seen her in a while. And she said, Baruch Hashem. She gave me one of these, Baruch Hashem. And I was like, it didn't sound like the real deal to me, So I just stood there and I looked on. I just looked at her like, yeah, So she took a beat and she said, Hodul Hashem. Like, instead of Baruch Hashem, I got a Hodul Hashem, thanks to God. Also, and I felt like, no, she's not really she's not yet telling the truth. So I waited another, a couple of seconds, and I just stood there and just looked at her like I wasn't probing or anything. I just gave a little more time for truth to emerge. And then she looked at me, because it dawned on her the reason why she had space to be able to answer more honestly was because I gave her, when I asked, Ma shlomech, how are you? I meant it genuinely. And so I gave her time to actually answer me honestly and with herself. And so the third answer was, Hashem Yazor. Like, God will help. Eibishter wird helfen. Which means I'm in trouble. And so within a 15-second interchange, we went from everything's fine to I'm in trouble. And she didn't even have to say, like, thank you for stopping long enough to actually ask the question fully, authentically, with integrity, which allowed me to answer authentically and with integrity. So a lot of our exchanges, and this is something that the Piasetzner focuses on, a lot of our exchanges, which we're having all day long, are loaded with sheker. They're loaded with nonsense, loaded with absolute lies. We say things we don't mean. We mean things we don't say. And we have good intentions. We have a lot of good intentions, but every time we don't tell the truth, and listen, you got to be careful with this, because it's like nitroglycerin. You're not interested in blowing anybody up, but you have to be careful, because every time we're away from the emes, from the truth, we are away from Hashem and we are away from ourselves, and we suffer for it afterwards. And that's what the Piasetzner Rebbe is talking about. He says sheker is sitra demota. He says falsehood, and he's not talking about telling a lie. He doesn't really mean that. I mean, he means that also, but he's talking about something deeper. Not being real. Not being real with other people, because we're not real with ourselves, and we're not real with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And instead of it being this thing like, oh, no, you got to be real, like as if you're getting musar for it. You're not getting musar for it. He's just pointing out a reality. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the source of all life and all vitality. Your soul is your channel of all life and all vitality. When you're not being true, it's like your soul goes into eclipse. It's connected to HaKadosh Baruch Hu at its source. It also can't stand sheker. It also can't stand falseness. So when you're not being authentically yourself, what happens? Your real self goes into hiding. And then you feel devitalized. And you feel like you don't have energy. And you feel like you're not happy. And that's the way it works for everybody. It's a universal ailment. And he's not talking about hurting people with the harsh truth. That is not what he's talking about at all, because he actually does touch upon, sometimes, you might have to make a calculation that I either can't answer the person, if someone asks me a question, I either can't answer the person entirely honestly first, he makes a distinction between strategic reasons or genuine reasons. He totally puts down strategic reasons. He says when we make a decision not to answer honestly, not to be forthright, for strategic reasons, like I don't want this person to think bad of me. I don't want this person to think I'm a fool. I'm trying to manipulate the other person with my answer, all the stuff that we do, people do that. We're always using our speech in very, very complicated ways. So he says, that's not the way, because it's like, it's all up here. Your head is telling you what to say and what not to say. Your nefesh doesn't have a word. Your nefesh, your soul itself, has something it wants to say. And every interaction is opportunity for the nefesh to speak. which is something that the Piasetzner Rebbe is very attentive to. My father, Zichron Livracha, used to say, every interaction is three. You and me and he. You, me, he. And that's something it means that there's space for the nefesh to communicate. And when you speak from the nefesh, when you're talking from your place of your soul, which means sometimes you have to slow down and you have to consider and you have to weigh out your words. What does my soul want to say here? So if I take the time for that, it could be the conversation goes a little bit more slowly, but what we're saying is a lot more important. And when I speak that way, then it allows the other person, like this exchange that I had with my friend, right? When I say ma shlomech, and I'm not play acting or just being like doing the things that people do. Oh, hi, how are you? But how are you? Like I don't even have to say it because when my nefesh is saying, how are you? The other person realizes that what I'm really asking is, how are you? I want to know, how are you really? And is there something I can do for you? And when you do that for another person, it gives them the space to also respond to you, nefesh to nefesh. And so you wind up entering into a very, very different kind of communication with other people. And then it's nefesh to nefesh speaking, soul to soul, even about simple things. Now, the Piasetzner Rebbe says we are trained to be performative from very young ages. And because of that, those are hard habits to come out of, very hard habits to come away from. He talks a lot about the necessity of equality, which I think nowadays it's so passé, what he calls to be ernst. Ernstkeit, I don't know, to be earnest. I mean, that's what it is, to be earnest. So earnestness in this day and age is a liability. A sign of sophistication and intelligence is to be cynical and ironic. I mean, among this group of women, among us, amongst ourselves, everyone here is already enough of a seeker and seeking the emes that you already know that the veil of cynicism and irony and that which passes for being a sophisticated and smart person in the world is not the way to go. I'm sure everybody gets that. Nevertheless, we're still trained up by the habits and of our culture and our communities and our families. And, that's something that's very hard to break because earnestness is it's not cool. It's so not cool to be like just this, this heart on your sleeve, genuine. Barry's earnest. Barry is earnest. And that's why we love her, because her nefesh is right out there. And then, I'm sorry if I'm embarrassing you, darling, but that's just the way it is, right? The people that we love and that we just can't get enough of them. It's because their nefesh they are authentically the nefesh self, and it's coming across to us, and it invites us to be that person too. So the Piasetzner Rebbe impresses upon us how important it is for us to develop this quality and the kinds of things we have to avoid. And he says, here's an example. You have someone who comes and asks you a question. Someone asks you a question, and, you sort of have to have some consideration about this one. How am I answering this question? What am I planning to give over in the conversation? And the head way of doing it, the seicheldika way of doing it is does it pay for me to answer her this way or that way? What's she going to think of me if I answer her this way or that way, right? So the Piasetzner Rebbe says that's the wrong way to go about it, because the position of your mental capacity, your seichel, is not to make a strategic decision about how you answer, but rather just to make the calculation. Once you know what your soul wants to say, what's the truth, you then have to use the capacity of the mind to make a decision. Is this the right thing? And is this the right way to express it at this point in time? And if not, then I have I have to be willing to sometimes say to a person, if I can't give them the emes or emes answer, to be able to say to them, you know, but I don't know what to say. I don't know what to say. Which in a conversation can feel like, you know, shouldn't I always know what to say? And the Piaseczner Rebbe says, no, that's what the halacha is. If you don't know if what you're going to say is really the absolute emistic or right thing to say, what are you supposed to say? I don't know. And that's okay. And we have to be willing to be such people who can be earnest and authentic and honest. And if we have to withhold a truth, that we withhold the truth in the way that the halacha demands, which is to be able to say, I don't know. Which another intelligent person, you're the person you're speaking to, is going to be able to understand. That means, I don't know if I can say this to you. I don't know if I should say this. When you answer in the open-ended halachic, I don't know. And it's okay. I don't have to devise an answer if the best thing to do is not to speak. I can be willing not to say anything at all. Okay, so all that's about like how you are, right? To be authentically the nefesh self, speaking and acting in the world, to be more deliberate, not to rush, not to be deliberate in the sense of I'm twice thinking and 3 times thinking everything through my head, but rather waiting for the still small voice to emerge from deep inside, because I have one, because my nefesh is here with me, and I want to hear from it, and I want to communicate with it, and I want it to be heard. So I could be willing to take a little bit of time before I say something and consider, what does my nefesh self have to say? And if I'm not used to doing it, so then it's just a question of practice. Like I must practice being my actual spiritual self in a real way in the world. It's not only about, you know, and you'll see that when you start doing this with people, it's so much easier to daven. It's much easier to communicate authentically with HaKadosh Baruch Hu when our habits of communication are authentic and straight, and the speaking of the soul from within us. Also, when we're going to the store and we meet somebody and we say, how are you? The other person needs to be present to us, and we have to be fully present to the other person. And when we're practicing this in all of our affairs, so we'll find that when we daven and we turn ourselves to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we don't have layers and layers, things to peel away just until we find our kavanah. We're used to speaking from the place of the nefesh. Now, he talks a little bit about children. And he says that, here's the language. Kol chino shel hayeled hu al shu tamim upashut. Why are children beautiful? What makes them so appealing? They're tamim and pashut. Now, tamim here doesn't mean that they're naive or, you know, they're not simpletons. They're tamim. They're themselves. They're just them. They're simply themselves. When you talk to a young child, and of course, how young the child has to be in order to be able to still feel like you're talking to their essential self all the time is really contingent on the point at which they start to lose their tmimut. They start to lose it at a certain point. One of the biggest problems is being performative, is that we train the children to be performative. And we like when they're performative, but we hate it too. We like when they're so cute, and they're cute for us, you know, and they do all kinds of wonderful things for us, and it's very sweet. And at the same time, it's like, but we know that they know that they're doing it. It's like a show. And then it has no chen. Like it can be cute and it can be clever, but chen it doesn't have. It's missing something. And the thing that it's missing is that they have self-consciousness and they're performative. It can happen so young. It's like, and we train them to this. And so you don't have to look further than your own children and your own grandchildren to realize the ways in which we train our children to be this way. And then afterwards they have to unlearn it. And then we have to unlearn it. I've mentioned this story before, but we had, when I was a baby, my sister was two and a half, and my father made a cassette tape. My Baba was visiting, and my father made a cassette tape. When did Nixon resign? Who remembers Nixon's resignation? What year was that? 70 what?
Like 73.
74.
73, that's it. I think it had to be then. I don't remember, because like you could hear the radio in the background on the tape. We had this old cassette tape of everyone being like, cousins were in the house, and my sisters had a babysitter. My oldest sister had a babysitter, and the babysitter was there with her. And like, my Baba was on the tape, and they're having conversations in Yiddish, and then there's the radio in the background. And my father was very enamored of like the cassette, the cassette recorder, and taping conversations and then playing it back. He was into the gadgetry of it.
It was 1974. I just Googled it.
It was before then. It was before the resignation, and while there was still balagan, it had to be. So so you hear me squeaking away in the background, like I was in the bouncer or in the whatever. And my sister, who's all of 2.5, she was with the babysitter, and the babysitter had taped her telling a story. She said, "Ivy, tell me a story." And my sister, a big 2 years old, says, there was a big bad wolf, and the big bad wolf couldn't find the piggies. So he went upstairs to find the piggies, and the piggies got lost in the jungle. Like, she made it up, spontaneously. She took the story of the 3 little piggies and she totally made a mishmash out of it. And of course, the babysitter laughs hysterically because it's so cute, because she had this cute little voice, and she was just doing it lefi tuma. Like, just like in her simple, sweet, innocent child self. Then later on in the tape, you can hear that the babysitter took my sister to where my parents were and where my Baba was. And she says, "Ivy, tell them the story of the 3 little piggies." And so my sister says, she said it word for word. She was like 2 and something. She says, "There was a big bad wolf, and the big bad wolf couldn't find the piggies." Like, she makes a little voice, And he went upstairs to find the piggies got lost in the jungle. 2 and something years old. And my Baba, I can hear her still in my ears. She says in the background, "Sie weiß schon, das ist a Kunst." See, she already knows that it's a trick. Meaning she only told the story once. It's just the second time. By the second time, it's already a performance. And so we have to acknowledge just how much we do still need to strip away from all of the stuff that's in our heads about what will they think of me? How do they see me? How will they understand me? And set all of that stuff aside. And it's an avoda to do it, but it's something that we have to do, because if not, the soul is like, the nefesh is choked. It's choked. And then it doesn't have the ability to speak. It can't be free, not to daven, not to do avodas Hashem. We're not free in ourselves because we spend so much time choking it down. So he says, right? Now, if you have, so if someone asks you a question, you have to set aside, you can't tell the absolute truth because the situation doesn't allow for it. It's okay, because you can still be earnest. Even in that situation, you can still stay your earnest, whole, authentic, genuine self, because what's driving you not to speak or not to answer is the truth of the situation and the soul's need, and not some, big calculation that you've got. You're going to impress them. You don't want to set them off. You don't want to, no, you do it from the place of authenticity, that the soul can have an opportunity to speak. Now, that's all about where you are at this moment in time. But what about all your possible self? Right? You're a sulam mutzav arza, rosho magia shamayma. The soul is, like we said before, it's like a ladder that that its feet are on the ground, but it goes all the way up to heaven. All of these levels and layers and possibilities, your possibles. And from one possible, you get more possibles and more possibles, endless possibilities, because you're a chelek of a kamimal mamish. You're a piece of God from above. That means just like God is infinite, your possibilities are infinite. Infinite mamash. Actually infinite. I mean, we don't live long enough to be able to actualize all of the infinite. We don't live long enough for that, but it's not like theoretically there's an end. There's no there's no upper limit there. Now, so how are you supposed to become the possibles? How are you supposed to be more than you are authentically and accessible to you today at this moment in time? So the practice of bringing in more of yourself, just think about it like bringing in. I found my prop, hold on. I found it. This was something that a student gave me. I have a special prop. This is something that a student gave me at the beginning of the year, because I'm always talking about it. It's like this. Okay, this is a Pez dispenser. She gave me the Pez dispenser because I'm always talking about the holy Pez dispenser. And it's like this. It doesn't really work like this. It works actually like this. It's kind of upside down. Okay, I know you're going to think I'm crazy, but hold on a second. Okay, so all of your possible selves, which are infinite, and all the possible things that you can be, it's like levels stacked with a little spring. There's a little infinite spring behind there, just like the Pez dispenser. Everyone knows what a Pez dispenser is. Little candies go inside. There's a spring. You put the stack in, yeah, stack of candies, and then every time you go like this, one pops out, and then the next one gets pushed up. Everybody's familiar with Pez? Okay, Pez. So above you, like from your head down, that's you. That's the self, your spiritual self that inhabits you. That's called your pnimi. That's the stuff that's already integrated inside of you, of your spiritual possibility. Above you, attached to you, are infinite levels and layers, infinite, that reach all the way up Hashemayim, that reach all the way up to heaven, to your source in God. Each one of them is like a little layer, a little something that as soon as you reach a new aspirational level, it descends and enters into you, becomes a part of you, you integrate it. And as soon as you get one in, the next one jumps down and fills the space. Just like if you took out the Pez candy, the next one would be slotted down. So you can imagine that you have like endless, I don't know about Pez, but crowns or halos or levels or rungs or pieces on the ladder, bits on the ladder, whatever you want to call it, that extends above you until your source in God, mamish infinite. But they're all above you. How are you supposed to get them in? So the main way is through yearning for them. And the main way to activate yearning for them is to speak. So it's exceedingly important to take time, preferably every day, to be in touch with your aspirational self. And in Breslov Hasidus, we call this hisbodedus. It means that you have to take time to be quiet with yourself, not to be distracted by other people and all of their demands, and just to be quiet with yourself and to ask HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Ribono Shel Olam, I want to be closer to you. I need to be nearer to you. I have, let's say, give the example of, I'm still an angry person after all these years of working on my anger. Please help me that I should come away from continuing to be the angry person that I am. Please fill me with patience. Help me to be the patient, ever patient, never flustered person that I so want to be. I'm not that person right now, let's say. I mean, I am not that person right now. So I'm not that person right now. But do I not have a possibility of being that person? Of course I do. How am I going to bridge the gap between that possible me and the actual me? I must ask for my, what we call my makifim, my upper levels that are not yet in me. I must daven for them to come to me. I have to want them to come to me. I have to identify what they are and talk to HaKadosh Baruch Hu about them, and continue to do so patiently and patiently with a lot of desire and yearning, and with a lot of hope that it's going to come to be. So I have to make time to at least to get to know my possible self. How am I supposed to know this possible self if I don't make time for her? She has to be known to me. And if I don't make time for her, no one else will. So that's a big focus in tefillah, in prayer, to come into contact with the aspirational self, and not to be afraid, to be really, again, earnest. Your soul doesn't want more of itself to be manifest through you in this lifetime, in this body, in this circumstance, in this world that we're in at this moment in time. Of course it does. Your soul wants to express itself fully. You'll get cooperation. It's not like you won't get help. You'll get assistance, but you do have to ask. So I don't know the way that everybody else talks about possible selves and possible yous, but you do have to spend time figuring out what's your next Pez in the dispenser. What's the next thing? What's the next plane? What's the next halo that you want to come down and come and enter in? Stop letting it being something outside of yourself, above your head, and get into you, into your head and into your mouth and into your body, that it should become a part of you. And that's called growing. This is what spiritual growth is, to take the aspirational self bit by bit, level by level, and bring it into ourselves. And if you look back, you'll see you've been doing it all along. Like, if you can honestly say that you can see a difference in your behavior, your way of being, your Yiddishkeit, your connection to Hashem, your emunah, your avodas Hashem, your tefillah in the last 5 years, 10 years, or 20 years. If you can identify that some things changed, so what you're looking at are stacked up pezes, stacked up crowns or rungs of the ladder that have now already become encompassed by you, but that just means that there are more. Whatever you got already, whatever already did change and already became a part of you and is already integrated, so that didn't touch, it didn't scratch the surface of your possibility, because your possibility is literally infinite. Infinite. Remember the song? The soul in her essential self is what? Yechida, tama unikia. She is unique. She is perfect. What is tama like? Like the tmimut. She is herself, a totality, a whole, integrated and authentic, perfect, unblemished. Nikia, clean. Perfect and connected with the source of all perfection from which she emerged. So the possibilities are endless. I'll tell you a story. I was, let's see, it was Sukkot time, it was Erev Sukkot. And I went to make a Bikur Cholim visit out of town. And we were in the middle of a seger. We're still in the seger, yeah. We were in the middle of a lockdown. And because the person who lives out of town was in the middle of a very big crisis, so her doctor had sent a letter to me with her medical information on it, so that if the police stopped me, which they were doing, if the police stopped me, that I should show them the letter that I'm a necessary support person for her while she's in a state of crisis, stuck in her house. So I went out of Yerushalayim, took a cab because I don't have a car, and so I went out there and I spent a few hours with her. And then I came back and I ordered, like, we don't have Uber here, we have Get. So I ordered a Get, and who shows up? These two brothers, these cute B'nai Torah, Sephardic B'nai Torah, who, young guys who like were cruising by, coming back into Yerushalayim, and they happened to flag my ride. So they come into the Moshav where I was, and they pick me up. And, you know, when you're wearing this kind of a hat, so, you know, this kind of a tichel, so everybody thinks you're a Rebbetzin. So I get in the car, and the boys start asking me questions. Harabanit, and they asked me my opinion about this. I'm like, listen, I'm not a rabbanit. And being very perceptive boys, they were like, this is a moshav that's entirely secular. This is not a religious moshav. If you're dressed like you're dressed, and you're out here, and you're going back to Geula, and that's where you live, you're a rabbanit. Like, they were very, very cute. So I said, no, I'm just visiting a friend. Anyway, so they're talking to me, and they have things they want to talk about, and shidduchim, and this. And we get closer to Yerushalayim, and one of the brothers says to me, can I ask you like a question? And I said, sure, whatever. If I can help you, I'm happy to. So he said, do you think that that a person can aspire to anything? So I said, do I think it's legitimate for a person to aspire to anything, or is there some natural limit to what any person should aspire to or can aspire to? So he said, yeah, like, is it real for a person to aspire to something that seems like it's totally, so big? So I said, well, it's a little bit, I said it was Erev Sukkot. So I said, it's like the sukkah. The sukkah is also like this. There's a maximum height of the sukkah beyond which it's no longer a sukkah. If a sukkah is higher than 20 amma tall, so then it's already not a sukkah, because you can't tell that it's schach that's covering the top. You have to be able to see that it's schach. That's what it says in the Talmud. So I said, that's a little bit like the upper space of the sukkah. It means like you have a 10. This is what Reb Nosson Bresler says. You have 10, that's 20 amma, 10, and then another 10. That means that you've got your 10 of yourself. And then you've got another 10 of a whole new aspirational self that's above your head. And you have contact with that. You're in the same airspace with that. You're in contact with that. Then there's stuff that's way, way beyond, aspirations for yourself that is way beyond where you are holding right now. To start davening about those things or aspiring to those things specifically is not really the way to go. Why? Because you still have to bring in the makif, the level that's directly above you, before you can start aspiring to another level beyond that. But is there any upper limit theoretically to what you can aspire to? No, because when you jump up or when it comes down, right? When the upper 10 drops into your 10, or when your next pez comes down into you, or your next crown falls into you and now it's a part of you, guess what? You have a whole new realm of new aspirational self that's waiting above you. And when that comes down into you, guess what? You have a whole new world of aspirational self that's above that too. And it will go on endlessly. So what I told this bacher, and he got it, he understood what I meant. I said to him, it could be that it's not all that beneficial today for you to aspire to something that is so, so far beyond where you're holding right now. But if you don't continue to aspire to the thing that is the next place you could be, you're never going to get there. That place, that distant place, only becomes close to you through level after level, pulling it down. Instead of thinking of climbing up the ladder, you're drawing it down. Aspirational self in, aspirational self in, and you won't even believe the places that you could go to. And everybody knows that this is true, because everybody should be able to look back and see over the past 5 years or 10 years or 20 years or 30 years that you have gone through significant changes. Yes, you have. Yes, you have. That's what life is. It's not called living if you haven't been bringing in makifin, if you haven't been bringing in further parts of your aspirational self. So it is possible. The question is, how far are you going to be able to go with it, and how well will you work with what is already the means at your disposal? And as the Piasetzner Rebbe says, to be in touch with the totality of yourself, you got to be in touch and expressing the spiritual self that you are right now. Genuinely, honestly.
Wow.
Okay, Barry.
You heard us 1 minute. We're not letting you go if we don't have.
That's okay. I'm not in a rush. I need to have
that
it
was so.
I'm fine.
Wow. Thank you.
But did I make any sense? Did you get it? You understand what I mean? It's all clear?
Oh my goodness, it was so beautiful.
Exactly. Listen, it's nothing theoretical. It's nothing abstract. It's very, very plain and push it.
It's
plain impression.
simple and deep. Like
Oh,
it's.
you took my words, Barry. Simple and deep, exactly.
And we practice this. We have opportunities to practice this all day, every day. Because before you answer, before you say the word, someone's talking to you, someone's asking you a question. Before you say the word, just inside, wait a second for the still small voice to speak. What does my neshama want to say here? What does my soul have to say?
I love what you said about asking somebody how they are. It's such a simple exchange, but it's so expansive when you really, like you said, give the person the time to hear your words and when you're genuine, that's what's going to come through to them. And I'm going to try that.
Try it. Like even you have, let's say we have 60 women, let's say, you all your physic women. Well, this is it's like a power nucleus, of authenticity that then goes off into the world. You all have your circles. You all have your families, your circles of your friends, your communities, people you work with, even when people are feeling very confined in the space, but we're in communication with people all the time. And that's it's such a power. It is so empowering to the other person. When you are, when you're authentic, it empowers the other person to be authentic.
Question. I have a question.
Yeah.
First of all, I must say you are authentic. You epitomize aspirations. Number one, I'm going out to buy Pez because that seems to be key, the Pez. But I think it's very dependent.
It's got a tichel. It's got a big head, a big crown.
You look great. Such a happy face. I think I'm going to become Breslov. My question
I think you're already Breslov.
Yeah. Ta-da! My question is, people can have aspirations and want to be authentic, but number one, question one, part one, is I think it depends who the other person is. People in the Chizuk mission feel a safe place. What do you do with people who you know or are not sure that they will take your authenticity in the right way? You're talking in the perfect world where it's great to be authentic and open up and be vulnerable. I find it easier to be authentic and listen to someone than actually let my neshama out. And second of all, you say with the Hisbodedus, how do we believe that if we ask Hashem, take away this or give me this or that, how do we believe that he's really going to do it? I don't want to be this. I want to be more patient. I want my kids to get this. I want to be more. Two-part question. Please answer.
Okay.
And I love you.
The first part was about being authentic in an inauthentic world.
Right.
That's what the Piasetzner Rebbe was talking about. It behooves us to be authentic, even in an inauthentic world. And if we find ourselves in a conversation with someone where the authenticity can't express itself, it's okay to limit the way in which we communicate so as not to be ourselves false. And it's powerful. It's so powerful. You don't know who you're going to touch. You don't know how hungry and thirsty the people around you are for something emistic, for some truth. The whole world is full of so much pretense. And how relieved would you be if when you ran into somebody and they gave you a shot of authenticity and truth, just in a simple interaction, a simple communication? What a breath, what oxygen that is to receive straight to the neshama. But here I am in the Alma de Shikra, I'm down here on the world of falsehood. And finally, it's like, I don't want to say it's who was it? Lahavdil, the Greek philosopher who went around with the candle, you know what I mean. Anyway, looking for an honest man, so who was Democritus? Who was the
Socrates? Democritus, something like that. He had a Greek name, I know that.
Yeah, indeed. So it's like, you're doing a chesed. That's a dibur of tzedakah. That's a chesed. And this stuff like this is happening with us all the time. People ask us, Laura says, in my coaching experience, this is what people are seeking. It's so
They are seeking it, but sometimes my question is when you are authentic and you don't know where the person is going to go, you're vulnerable, you're opening yourself up. Yes, it's nice in a chizuk mission, but what in a situation where people aren't in an inauthentic world where you don't know what people do with what
You're
you
talking
say?
about unburdening yourself. Unburdening yourself is not what I'm talking about. I don't mean that. That's not always appropriate. No, that's not always the right thing to do. But we use a lot of verbiage, you know.
Okay, let's go to it if we can, just because the time is short. Everybody wants to get a piece of this right now. Who's next, please?
I don't know if anyone has their hand up.
Who?
Lefka, does anybody have a hand up?
I saw Sheila raising her hand.
Sheila was raising her hand.
Sheila, please.
Barry, you're the moderator. You pick. I don't want to play favorites.
A whole. There's many. Okay, Sheila, you're up, please.
I think the part about hispodedut and being and thinking about what your goal is in life and your yid, as you say, all that's wonderful. And that's very important for us. I agree with the question of meeting people in the street and trying to be honest with them and talk about yourself. I don't think that the message.
Did I say talk about yourself?
Yeah, well, that's what I'm just saying. I'm just sharing with you. That's what it sounded like. So listening to them, taking a moment and being sincere to hear if they want to speak is one thing, but it sounded like you were saying we should be open and honest in this world with everybody. And unless I'm not understanding you and it seems like someone else didn't, you have to be a little more clear, please, about what.
Okay, so I'll clarify. It's not about being, like lacking a filter. That's not what he's talking about. Okay. Because having a filter is sometimes necessary for what the soul requires. I think even someone put up a little chat, although I didn't see it. Just blipped in and out about tznius as opposed to authenticity. I don't see those as being in contradiction to each other. Just like the neshama wants emes, the neshama is also tzanua in itself. It's not that we're not talking about being either repressed or being overly sharing. That's not the issue. The problem is that we have a lot of pretense and a lot of performativeness in just our way of being with other people. This is just the way it is. This is how we are with other people very often. And when we meet an authentic person, someone whose neshama is really, the nefesh is really coming across, we like being with those people and we like talking to those people, even if it's only briefly, because we feel at that moment in time that we are actually having an honest, direct contact with something that's real between two nefashos. And that's it's oxygen in human relationships, and it's oxygen for the soul that cannot be substituted. And we later on lacking it, if we are lacking it in our interactions, it's no wonder that we find ourselves feeling stymied in avodas Hashem and in davening, because we are not used to being straight with ourselves and others. We're not used to it. It doesn't mean you spill your guts to everybody that you meet on the street. That's not the point. But just in the most basic way, I cannot be so preoccupied with what the other person is thinking of me and how I seem to others in my communications. I can't.
Liba's raising your hand, but Liba, you need to unmute, and then Orly, you're after Liba.
This was so magnificent. Thank you, Yehudis. I thought of two things. Rabbi Moshe Weinberger once shared, and he teaches the Piazetzna, Eish Kodesh, a lot of the material. But he once shared, why is it that when you go for a bracha to a Rebbe, why do you feel good when you come away from getting a bracha for a Rebbe? It's because that Rebbe only sees you as the beautiful neshama that you are and reintroduces you to that very beautiful part of you that sometimes you forget yourself. And I find that on this Chizuk mission in particular, it's people are prepared to be authentic and to bare their souls, their neshamas with each other. And that's why we feel this sense of chizuk. We feel this sense of chizuk because we're actually reintroducing ourselves to ourselves. And furthermore, I feel like so much of us who've been born in our religious from birth world, right? A lot of our, and the reason why I got so involved in chinuch and in trying to change things in schools is because so many teachers think that the right thing for them to do is to give a pat answer, even though it's not necessarily the answer. When you say, I don't know, you're really almost validating the person when they're asking a question. You're validating them for who they are, not the other way around. And that lack of authenticity comes through very often with people who are teaching Torah. So I think what you shared was so powerful on so many levels, both in the interpersonal relationships that we have with other people, and also in terms of us trying to grow in our Avodas Hashem. It's so beautiful. Thank you.
You know, there's the point I wanted to just add, even though people may still have questions. You know, it's like when let's think about when you're talking about chinuch, about children. So you can have a lot of interactions with children. And let's say if you're still in the part of life where you're raising fairly young children, where there's a part of the self that could be frustrated with the child. There's a part of the self that's exasperated with the child, right? And then there's the part of you that doesn't get exasperated and doesn't get frustrated because it's actually your nefesh, and your nefesh is Yechida Tamo Nikia, and your soul does not get exasperated with the child. The parts of the self that are exasperated, frustrated, and at the end of your rope, that's not the neshama. The neshama is connected. It's a chelik elokam mimal mamish. It's very wise and it's very patient, and it has never-ending koach, honestly. So it's sort of like, okay, there's a part of me, let's say the child has done something that is just completely out of bounds. Part of me wants to speak immediately. And there's another part of me that's saying, don't say that. Don't say that. That's not what you need to say. And to be able to make a distinction and give enough space and time to allow what my neshama wants to say to this child, what my nefesh has to say. That's a big avodas chinuch. That's the hardest thing, because all the other parts of my midos that are not corrected, and my assumptions and my fears and my embarrassment and all that other stuff is speaking very, very loudly. And how much of it is performative and comes from just my midot lo metukanot? That's a nice subject, a separate subject. But there's something inside of me that's saying, wait a second, that's not what you need to say. And you know how you know? Because after you blow up at the kid, guess what? Immediately afterwards, you're going to say, why did I say that? I should have said something else. And because I didn't have time to allow my nefesh to speak the truth of this situation. And maybe what my nefesh has to say is nothing. Maybe what my nefesh has to say is just, like, this is just the situation that we're in. Here we are together in this situation, you and me, beloved child. You know, what it is not something that, because the other parts of myself are making a lot of noise. So what's really there to be communicated, it might not get said. My daughter in high school, she had a teacher that she loved very, very much, who was a granddaughter of the Slonim Rebbe. And she used to tell the girls, my grandfather, my Zayda Zichron Levracha, used to say, every word you say, you have to figure out, does this word come from the world of Churban or the world of Binyan? Does this word emerge from the world of destruction or the world of building? If it's not from the world of building, don't say it. Nefesh is a builder. The nefesh is a chizik machine. The nefesh is a goodness. It doesn't mean that every word has to be sweetness and light. Sometimes there has to be something that could be that it requires could be, but we're always like all over the place, and that doesn't have to do with the nefesh, and that's not ourselves. This is not ourself. This is not the fullness of ourself. Okay. Did somebody else have something you wanted to share? Yes.
Yeah, so just what I wanted to say before everyone cleared up, so I don't, but just on what you just spoke about. So I'm a preschool teacher, And you just made me realize that what I teach my kids, smell the flower and blow out the candle. And I actually make these flip cards. It's a visual card that I'll laminate for them. And on one side, there's a flower, and on the other side, there's a, you know, beautiful candle. And anyone who wants them, I teach all boys. I tell them they could put it in their back pocket. And whenever they feel like they need to smell the flower and blow out the candle before they react. And I realized to take this to a Ruchnius level, which I just did as I was listening to you. And you have to forgive me because I missed your introduction. So I don't know your name.
My name's Yehudis. My name's Yehudis. It's okay.
Yehudis. So, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Napach, right? He breathed into us. Right? Hashem blew into us a neshama, like into our nose. Hashem blew into us. And so when you are smelling the flower, that neshama is coming in. It's giving you that strength to strengthen, to calm, to take a deep breath. And you blow out. That neshama is allowing you to blow out. Just the positivity is coming in. And the neshama is allowing you to blow out the negativity so that you can react calmly. And I was trying to take my little visualization to a more adult level with meaning. So
beautiful. Thank you.
Ladies, any other questions?
Can I ask something? I just want to clarify. It seems like people, Rifki, it seems like people are struggling a little bit with the ideas. If you meet someone who you feel is inauthentic, how you show up. So it sounds like what you're saying is that's your moment to almost be a role model of kind of just figuring out the best version of you that you can be in that situation. Not that you're educating them, and not that you're so vulnerable necessarily that you don't feel in touch with yourself, but because you can't sort of force your authenticity on somebody if it doesn't feel comfortable. So you're saying maybe that the most authentic you could be then is to hold back kind of, and not.
I feel like everybody's, not everybody, but people are having a confusion about authenticity and TMI. This is not what we're talking about, okay? Too much information is not the subject here. It's about being you. I remember when I went to Yavne, I learned Yavne, and I remember when I first came there, and I started to develop a relationship with Mora, Zechron Levracha. It's very, very hard to believe that she's not with us anymore. It's really mamish impossible. And so I don't know if people are familiar with Rebbetzin Ospan, Zechron Levracha. She passed away, Pesach time. And so she was our Menahelis, and I remember sitting there one day in a class and feeling like, just looking at her, whenever she was, no matter how tired I was like on with all cylinders going whenever she walked into the room for the years that I was in Cleveland. And she's teaching, and I'm watching her, and I'm just absorbing her. And I remember having this thought, you know, I'm a big 20 years old or whatever it was. And I have this thought, like, she's a person. And if she's a person, and when I'm with her, I feel like a shadow of a person. I remember thinking that. And then I started to realize a little taste of, oh, Shani says, Shivisi, yeah, this is part of Shivisi Hashem Negvisame, is to be with Hashem and the person authentically with the nefesh in the place where you are. But I remember feeling like she's all here. And in recognizing that in her, it brought to my attention the extent to which I was not all there. I don't mean in terms of being a tzadikis, and I don't mean in terms of being learned. I'm talking about self. She was so fully herself. And I remember having this awareness of, oh, that's something to aspire to be so thoroughly here, to be fully present, engaged, and myself. Like, she was such a big role model for that. There was she perfectly, really, really the tmimus and the pshitos was there, not from the place of being a simple. It's not simpleness. It's wholeness, to be whole. And that's what we're missing. You know, like Laura said, people come for coaching, like in your coaching work, that's what a lot of what people are seeking. That's what we want, because when we're not being fully and authentically it's not about being your highest self or your best self. That kind of language is a language that we hear a lot. And sort of like, you know, when your game is on, that's like the performative garbage that this whole world is full with. I'm sorry, but that's the kind of language is itself problematic. You know, being in your game, being all that stuff, which is really that is not it. It's not it. It's exactly like the Piasetzner Rebbe says. It's Ernstkeit.
Can I ask something?
It's earnestness. Yeah.
When I'm listening to the conversation, a lot of thoughts are coming to me also. But I think for my own understanding or my own growth, I think a lot of us, we're concentrating when we say that the other person's not authentic. Why are we focusing on seeing non-authenticity in somebody else? I think we need to concentrate that maybe that's a message to yourself.